I signed up for the LA Marathon. I've never ran a marathon before. Truthfully, I've never wanted to run a marathon. Most people do it just to prove they can accomplish a challenging physical feat. I was a track athlete in high school and junior college, so I felt like I was already an accomplished enough runner to check off the box of physical feats most people would never do. The problem is that accomplishment is like a drug. Those who are the most drawn to the pursuit of accomplishments are also those who are the least satisfied by each accomplishment, leading to the often eternal pursuit of ever increasing varieties and doses of them. I began a 6 week training block in November 2023 following a 5K that I ran earlier that month. Despite not being naturally drawn to the marathon, I sort of began building towards one, primarily because I believed it could benefit my 5K performance. After all, the training philosophy doesn't differ much between the 5K and marathon for us amateurs. The training philosophy is similar. Run a high volume of easy miles to enable you to run farther, and mix in the occasional higher intensity workout to adapt the body to faster paces. Before training for the marathon, the farthest I ever ran was the equivalent of a half marathon. For this training cycle, I took bits and pieces from various marathon training programs I could find online and just fit them into my ideal schedule. The basic philosophy of marathon training is to improve your aerobic base to the point where you can stay on your feet and cover the 26.2 miles or 42.2 kilometers. The key workout is, of course, the long run, which gradually builds up to around 20 miles, though my longest of the training cycle was closer to 23 miles. In early March 2024, I booked flight and hotel reservations for Los Angeles. I woke up on my travel day with minor gastrointestinal distress. However, I still packed for the trip, I still got on BART to head to the airport, and I came back home. About one stop into the BART trip on the way to the airport, my gut and stomach were sending me weird signals, and the last place I want to be when I'm not feeling well is in an airplane, even if it's just for a 1 hour flight. Even though I can't control my internal systems, I was understandably disgusted with myself when I came back home. I just sat right here in my chair, reflecting on the 16 weeks of training I put into this, only to arrive at a crossroads where I need to decide, do I get back up, grab my luggage, and rush to the airport, crossing my fingers that my digestive system will have calmed down by then, and that I still somehow make my check-in time at the airport? Do I just concede to having wasted over 3 months of training? Do I wait until the following morning to see if I'm feeling better so I could potentially rent a car and just drive 6 hours to LA? I decided to give up on the idea of running the LA Marathon. I then fired up the search engine for lists of races that will take place on St. Patrick's Day weekend, and I clicked on a link that took me to a list. One of the races on the list was this one. Of course, I kicked myself for not knowing that the marathon day I trained for had an event just across the bay that didn't necessitate hotel and flight accommodations. There was just one problem. The Oakland Marathon start time was scheduled for 7 a.m. on a Sunday, and as far as I know, there is no public transportation between San Francisco and Oakland before 8 a.m. on a Sunday. So my mind still being in a semi-defeatist state, I gave up again. That is until I thought of the idea of exploring virtual race options. So I returned to the list that brought me to the Oakland Marathon page, and sure enough, that list marked the Oakland Marathon as having a virtual race option. A bit of navigating around the Oakland Marathon website takes you to this page. The page gave me both a sense of relief and a sense of anger. Obviously, the relief was due to the fact that I still had a viable option to sign up for, which I did, of course. The anger is due to how rigid this makes the LA Marathon appear. The LA Marathon, which is non-refundable, has no virtual race option for those who cannot make it directly, whereas the Oakland Marathon has a virtual race option that you can either sign up for directly or transfer your in-person status to a virtual option if you already signed up to run in person. The reason I'm including this information is because this is the type of video that may attract people who are considering running their first marathon, and I want this to be something those people look out for when considering which event to sign up for. Since I moved my long runs to Saturday morning, I decided to wake up and run this marathon on the morning of Saturday, March 16th. This was obviously going to be a race against myself, and my goal was to cover the distance in under 4 hours. Here's a list of what I brought with me. For the shoes, I wore all black Under Armour Charged Assert 9s. For the kit, if you want to call it that, the bottoms were just 2 layers of generic black half tights, and the top was a Dryquip short sleeve moisture wicking t-shirt, forest green heather color for St. Patrick's Day weekend. For devices, I wore a Garmin Forerunner 55 to log the exercise in the Garmin app. I also wore an Apple Watch to log the exercise in whatever Apple Health apps are connected to it. If for whatever reason you care about the socks that I wore Champion Double Dry Cruise socks. I'm not sure if these are even technically athletic socks, but I've been using them for anything and everything athletic related for the past decade. I also brought my iPhone because the Strava app on my phone is what I used as my official time and distance tracker. It's the only running app I've used over the years that gives me consistent GPS readings when I'm out on runs. For example, the 2 screenshots on the left show how Strava interpreted the same route I ran 2 days in a row. The 2 screens on the right show how Garmin interpreted those same 2 runs. You can understand why I wouldn't want to extrapolate the GPS errors of a mile shaving app over the course of an entire marathon. I'm still annoyed at my Garmin for interpreting the longest run in my training block to be 21.8 miles, when the route I ran that day was closer to 23 miles. For the marathon, I also brought along a running belt I wore for every run over 12 miles during training in order to carry fuel. And speaking of fuel, for fueling and hydration, I carried a 16-ounce water bottle in my hands, which is annoying, but not as annoying as running with it in my runner's belt, as I learned during way too many of my training runs. You can guarantee that if I ever did this again, it will be with a hydration vest. More on that later. For the fueling part, I brought strawberry flavored Cliff Blocks, which are energy chews because I'm sort of grossed out at the thought of downing gels. Each package comes with 6 pieces. A serving size is 3 pieces, which is 100 calories and 24 grams of carbs. Normally I down the first serving at the 30-minute mark of my long runs and every 45 minutes after. This marathon would be the same, except that I would eat a serving just before the start of the run because your boy basically woke up and planned to run this marathon fasted aside from the instant calories of the energy chews, and I don't recommend this. You should probably not run a marathon fasted or semi-fasted. Anyway, I began my run around 10 a.m. I used the first few miles to sort of feel out a pace I felt I could hold for roughly 4 hours, which actually sounds insane now that I say it out loud. But my goal was to cover the distance in under 4 hours, so I was mentally locked into being out there for that length of time. The first 4 to 6 miles were a mixed bag. That pace I sort of felt out that I could run for roughly 4 hours was showing on Strava as right around 9 minutes per mile, which would put me on target for a sub 4 hour marathon. On the other hand, that first 4 to 6 miles brought the usual calf pain that I've been suffering from for probably a year now. The pain ranges from annoying pain that mysteriously goes away several miles into my runs to pain that could be debilitating enough for me to stop and walk. Thankfully, I've done enough runs to know that the calf pain is actually more often present when I run at slower paces, especially when I run closer to the 9:30 to 11 minute per mile range. And since my marathon goal requires me to run faster than that, I was banking on the calf pain to eventually go away on its own. In miles 7 through 10, that's exactly what happened. Not comfortably, but it happened. The calf pain got replaced with numbness and tingling in my lower legs during this stretch of the run, which leads me to wonder if there's a circulation issue going on there, or if I just need to get some better shoes. Mile 11 is when I first became aware of the effort required to maintain the sub 4 hour pace, which means I'm beginning to press a little bit. That means the pace I'm running could no longer be sustained merely through cruise control. I'm having to work a bit. This would continue through about mile 17. Then comes mile 18 when I would experience what countless marathoners have claimed to have experienced. Mile 18, the wall. This is when my legs got stiff and I realized I could no longer sustain anywhere near the speed I had been running up to that point. Mile 18 is the point where I would begin walking periodically just to give the inflammation in my legs a chance to settle down and to give my body a chance to clear slightly more lactate than it would if I tried to continue running. These periods of walking would allow me to run in short bursts, even if that running was still at a snail's pace. I also experienced periods of gastrointestinal distress throughout the run, though not enough to slow me down by itself. The gut issues, however, did seem to be more of a nuisance after mile 16, and so did the constant stopping at intersections, even if they did give me some much needed rest. I especially did a lot of walking the last few miles as I seemed to be struggling with dehydration due to having ran out of water at around 23 miles. So I really struggled down the stretch as I was playing a bit of a dangerous game, exerting myself in the middle of a bright sunny day with all of my body's energy systems quite literally drying up. But I survived and shuffled to the finish line with a final time of 4 hours, 10 minutes, and 18 seconds. All things considered, while it wasn't my goal time, it was close enough for me to not be completely ashamed of the performance. And without going deep into the research rabbit hole, I'm going to assume my performance was in the better half of first-time marathoners. Oh, I could barely walk right now. Even hurts to squat. But I made it. Do I think I had the fitness to run a sub 4-hour marathon that day? My heart says yes. At the 18-minute mark when I hit the wall, my heart rate wasn't exactly spiking. I think my body was running low on electrolytes because in that final quarter of the marathon, I still felt like I had some fitness left, but my body just couldn't access it, which is a sign that my struggles down the stretch were likely due more to my poor fueling and hydration than they were to my level of fitness. That being said, here's what I would do differently if I had to do it all over again. I'll start with the shoes. I may need to invest in some real distance shoes for each pillar of training, speed work, long runs, etc., and rotate them throughout the week so they don't get worn down quickly, and so my legs don't get worn down. Then there's the hydration issue, which is likely the biggest reason I crashed and burned. I would certainly need to take in way more than the 16 ounces of water I drank. I would definitely benefit from taking in some electrolytes throughout the run, which includes looking into salt tablets considering how much salt I lost through sweat. Some people are high volume sweaters, some people are salty sweaters, and some people are both. I, unfortunately, am both, which means there needs to be a focus on replacing both fluids and electrolytes throughout long runs. This means if I train for another marathon in the future, I'm replacing the running belt with a running vest. Not only does a running vest look like it feels more natural to carry, I've seen some that come with fluid pouches that carry over 4 times the amount of water that I drank during the marathon. It would also come with extra room to carry perhaps a small electrolyte drink. Then there's the fueling issue. Even though I mentioned being grossed out by the idea of gels, I can understand why it's the most popular form of fueling a run. They appear easy to just open, squeeze into your mouth, and swallow, whereas the Clif Bloks chews can be a bit of a struggle to open, get out of the package with your teeth, and then adequately chew them over the course of the next mile. Regarding training, if I had to do it all over again, I would mix in more speed work. While I did some 5K specific work at the beginning, I focused way too much on running a lot of slow miles, which is fine if you're just trying to build an aerobic base. But at some point you have to get comfortable running faster paces if you have a time goal. And while this next thing might seem counterintuitive, I would run my easy runs faster. I spent way too much of the training block trying all of the math and low heart rate zone training that's spread like wildfire online, when all it did was make me not want to run anymore. I think I tried low heart rate zone for several weeks before just returning to running by feel. It's also worth noting that I never had the calf issues until I started trying to run my easy runs the way all of these so-called marathon experts online claim. When I got the calf issues, no amount of massaging or stretching between workouts, or even getting new shoes solved the issue. The only thing that seems to have done the trick is by running my easy runs faster, but at still a somewhat conversational pace. The next thing I would do is not rely on Garmin, or at least the Forerunner 55. The GPS on the watch has been terrible for me, especially when I'm running between high rises, and I've had issues trying to sync workouts to the watch. Remember earlier when I said I have a hunch my Garmin watch shaves miles from my total distances? After the marathon, here's how far Strava says I ran, and here's how far Garmin says I ran. I've returned to using the Strava app on my iPhone to track runs, but an ideal setup would be a watch with the GPS accuracy of the Strava app. And lastly, for recording videos on my runs, I would consider getting a GoPro or similar action cam. I have one of the DJI Osmo action cams, but my iPhone 11 somehow gets better image quality and better image stabilization, which sort of defeats the purpose of having an action cam. That being said, it seems like everyone in the running community who makes running content uses GoPro, and the footage in their videos looks pretty good. One of the reasons I couldn't record much video from this marathon is that I needed my phone's battery to last for 4 hours while it had an active GPS and timer running in the background. And of course, recording video drains the battery quicker than almost anything. This is also the reason why I only listened to music for the first couple of miles before running the rest of the marathon to the sounds of the city. Marathon training is a mixed bag. Honestly, I actually find it mostly annoying, but I can understand why people keep doing it. As I alluded to in the What I Would Do Differently chapter, there are definitely ways I could make the process less annoying, but if I ever do this again and believe I have a better marathon in me, I still have to prove it.